Okay, so we got the official reveal of Nintendo Switch 2, the next generation, I guess. We'll talk about it, of hardware from Nintendo. It was about an hour long. I will summarize it the best I can and give my thoughts on it. My high level thoughts is that I assume if you're a Nintendo fan, this was probably great. Uh, for me, someone who hasn't owned a Nintendo a piece of hardware since the Game Boy Color, I'm not very convinced. And in fact, I went from definitely pre ordering this day one to at least waiting a while. Let's get into it. We'll talk more about it. Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to use IGN's kind of summary article here. This is by Adam Bankhurst. Please go check out the actual article yourself if you want to read this more carefully. I'm mostly going to be going off of watching the presentation myself and then kind of scanning this article. There are some things in here that I want to talk about that I don't think they cover, but we'll get to it. So we've already seen the Switch 2. They revealed what it looked like and some extremely basic features of it a while ago. The kind of high level thing is that it comes out on June 5th, I believe. I believe it's actually the day before Summer Game Fest, which is interesting timing. I imagine we'll be having Xbox and Sony showcases in that vicinity as well, and that we will also have probably EA and some of the other companies doing their showcases as well. If they do them, we'll have to wait and see. $450 for the base console, $500 for a combo that includes the new Mario Kart game. Considering that Mario Kart game is $80 on its own, or 90 if you want a physical copy, I guess that's a good deal for 50 bucks to get the game. That's kind of the high level. Pre-orders will begin, I believe, next week, but you have to like ask to be able to pre-order. I assume this is an anti scalping measure, but you have to have an account for like 2 years and have spent so much money and all that. At some point, pre-orders will become available for everyone, or you'll just have to wait to buy it when it comes out and when they're in stock. This is 2 months away. It's gonna come up way faster than you think it will. June seems so far away, but it's summertime. It's not really that far away. So, let's scroll down here. So we have the prices here. The pre-orders begin on the 9th. That's my mistake. Yeah, so here's the high level thing. Nintendo rarely, if ever, talks tech. They give the highest level, they give the cell phone pitch, right? Like when you go to a cell phone store, they're often not going to be giving you like exact details about the processor and the amount of RAM and all of that stuff in it, right? They're basically gonna be like, here's an Android, here's an iPhone, here's the newest one, here's an older one that's a little bit cheaper. And that's definitely the market that Nintendo focuses on. Obviously, there's very tech savvy people who have Nintendo Switches as well. And they get into that. And at some point, we'll have the Digital Foundry, takes on all of the footage we've seen. And eventually, when we get hardware, they'll talk about all of that. The long of the short of it is it's in 7.9-inch LCD screen. That's 1080p. They do claim it can do up to 120 hertz or FPS, and that the dock will allow it to go up to 4K 60 FPS when you're playing. So apparently this is the guess is that the screen could be a little bit nicer than just your standard LCD screen, but we'll have to wait and see. The Joy-Cons are now magnetically attached instead of being clicked in. A lot of people complained about the original Switch and how that connection isn't very secure, so you could always feel like a little wobble. The hope is this new magnetic attachment won't have any of that at all, that it'll be a lot better and less prone to being broken. We'll have to wait and see. There's a mouse control in this. I'll talk more about that in a little bit, as well as this new C button, which went into this, probably in my opinion, the worst part of this presentation, where like every console is going to have a gimmick, right? The Xbox One was the Kinect, and the PS4 or the PS5, I still think the gimmick was this like 3D sound thing where you would like send Mark Cerny a picture of your ear and they would make a perfect sound profile for you. In my opinion, that was all just BS. But maybe some people will live or die by it. I don't know. This console, one of this console gimmicks is going to be this communication thing where a combination of being able to use voice chat that goes through your console, even if it's across the room. It's giving me big Connect vibes where you would play Call of Duty back in the Xbox One days and hear a kid's like mom screaming at him to get off the Call of Duty to come eat dinner or do his homework or whatever. That's definitely coming back here. They even showed off this thing where you can be playing a game and down, it'll kind of picture in picture the game, and then down below you can see your friends what they're playing, potentially in the same game or not. And if you have a USB C camera, they sell one, and supposedly you can use other ones as well. I am curious to how compatible that's going to be. I bet it won't be very. You can watch them, their faces, as they play their game. Um, all kinds of issues with this. It looks like it was run at like 10 frames a second, your friend's gameplay. The camera quality was abysmal on this. I haven't been a customer of Nintendo in quite a while, but I am under the impression that their online system isn't exactly the most robust thing in the world, that it's not very user friendly. It has lots of issues with speed and connectivity and uptime and all that. So this just seems like one of those things that's not going to work out well. But they have a new button on the controller, this console that looks very similar to their old one in almost every way and seems to work extremely similarly. They had to get that gimmick button on there. They got it. I suspect it won't be very popular to use because Discord exists. They're still going to be using game cartridges. The console is going to have 256 gigs of internal memory. Just wild that was something that they tried to like brag about because the Switch has 32 gigs. The Switch games are smaller than what you would see on an Xbox Series X or S or PlayStation 5. So, you don't have 250 gig games necessarily, at least not yet, because they have lower quality assets and things like that. So, but I believe there are still games that would like fill up the original Switch's memory with one game. I want to say some mention of maybe Yakuza, or there was a game that I saw someone mentioning. So what's going to be interesting about the memory card thing is that you can add memory and they still use SD cards, which is like, I didn't know was still a thing. And not only do they use SD cards, but the original Switch could use like the lower quality ones. Well, for reasons, they are requiring SD Express cards in the Switch 2. That's all that will work in it. And if you want 256 gigabytes more of memory, it is $100 right now. Maybe over time it'll get cheaper. We'll see. But that's like, for $100, at least now, you can get a gig proprietary card for an Xbox, which everyone loves the PlayStation 5 this gen because they have the M.2s that you can add yourself, which is super cool. It was a very good move by them to do that instead of a proprietary option like Xbox, which I haven't really had an issue with. I have the 1 gig system and then a 1 gig card put in. I've never needed more than that. But this is worse, objectively, at least in my opinion. But we'll get back to that when I kind of wrap up my thoughts. They have this new game share system where some games in certain circumstances you can share a copy with someone else. I don't know. Like I just have zero faith in them doing this in a way that's like really satisfying, but we'll have to wait and see. They showed off some new accessories, the Pro controller, which actually does look really nice. They added the little C button because they have to. It also has back paddles now. It has one on each side, which a lot of people seemed excited about. It just straight up has the Xbox layout, the offset sticks, which in my opinion is the best setup. But I'm definitely biased as kind of an Xbox fan. They have a $50 camera that we have no details about at all. I imagine it's going to be a 1080p, extremely basic USB-C camera. Like I run an Elgato 4K camera. I'm really curious if this is going to work with something like that. I imagine it may work with it very basically, but it'll strip out any of the higher quality features and stuff that it has. But I could be wrong. They also have a bunch of other accessories, like a $13 strap for the Joy-Con. The actual Joy-Cons themselves, the Joy-Con 2s, are gonna be $90 a pop if you want a new pair of them. They have a charging grip for $35. The Joy-Con wheel for two of them is going to be $20. The Switch 2 dock set is $110. Carrying cases, all this other stuff. One of my biggest gripes that I've already noticed that I'm curious how this is going to play out is the Joy-Con 2s have this mouse functionality that they showed off quite a bit. It's a cool idea. You remove it from the system, and either you're playing on a big screen or playing where it's like with the little dock kicked out, little kickstand. And you use one of the Joy Cons, you flip it, and it has like an optical sensor on the side of it that meets the console, right? So you can, with your like left hand, I'm right-handed, use it like a normal Joy-Con with the joystick and everything, and then the right one use it like a mouse for shooter games. Like they showed off a Metroid game that using this. Cool idea. Those Joy-Cons aren't very big, and I'm not that big of a guy. I'm 5'9", and I have maybe slightly large hands for my size, but probably fairly normal. There's no way an average person is going to be able to handle this tiny little Joy-Con in that angle for more than like 5 minutes without their hands cramping up. So I'm curious if they're going to make some kind of, attachment or housing, or just a straight up mouse controller that you can sync up to the system separately to have a more typical form factor. Because like, I know it looks cool on a 1 hour reveal of this, but I have very little faith that that's going to be a very useful thing for most people from an ergonomics point of view. Not to mention, a lot of people, I assume, have switches on their TVs, or even if you're playing handheld. I don't know how many people have like a TV tray sitting around, and maybe you'll get one to be able to use this feature. But I suspect this isn't going to be as big of a deal or as useful as it may seem. Again, maybe falling into the gimmick category. For actual games, they showed off Mario Kart World. Definitely seems very Forza inspired, for better or worse. It looks like a Switch game. For the Switch 2, it sounds like it's going to be very crisp. It's going to look really good, have nice frame rates and all of that. I was interested, and I was watching some Digital Foundry coverage where they have a contributor there named Ollie, who's pretty obviously a huge Nintendo fan, which is fine, especially on a channel that's very PC centric. Maybe a little too biased, but that's, your own opinion. He was kind of going on about how beautiful Mario Kart World looked. And like, I think if we're talking about a brand new console from one of the big three, I understand that its target isn't to beat the Series X or the PS5 or whatever. But I think that at some point we have to talk about the games that they put out and their capabilities on some kind of level ground. And like this game, it looks like an old game. Like it doesn't look great. Like it looks fine. And it's all more about art style and gameplay. I'm sure the gameplay of this game is going to be insane. And it looks nice. It's poppy. It looks good. Like I assume frame rate's going to look great. But I think it's interesting, the different levels of expectation we have for these different systems, but we'll get back to that. They showed also it's gonna have up to 24 drivers, but then they talked about, yeah, you can do like the share thing with this game, but it's only with 4 consoles, and it sounds like you're limited to those 4 people when you're doing those races. If you want to do 24, you have to be independent. Again, this is going to be very multiplayer heavy, so we'll see how that plays out in the long run for them. But this was one of the first one. This was the first game that in the reveal, and afterwards, we found out that on its own for the digital copy, it's going to be $80, and it's going to be $90 for the physical. They are boldly stepping into a new world when it comes to game pricing. And one of the things I find interesting about this is that even with this new console, this isn't like the assets in this game, the graphics in this game, all of that isn't going to be breaking new ground here, right? And what I was always told by Nintendo fans or people who like Nintendo is, it's not about the graphics, it's not about the performance, it's about the gameplay, which is fair, and the like art direction, which is fine. That's why a game like the Zelda games, or some of the other ones, probably not Pokemon at this point, can get away with having not perfect performance because their art direction is so good and people love it. But we also have been told for years that the reason that games are so expensive and why they're getting more expensive is because it takes a lot of time and money to do these high quality assets and models and textures and all this. Well, that's not a problem Switch games have. Even Switch 2 doesn't seem like it's going to have that issue. So why are Switch 2 games the ones that are going to set this new precedent for price? It doesn't make sense to me. Like, they aren't pushing the boundaries of graphics and things like that. So why are they the ones pushing the cost higher? You can't convince me that Switch 2 exclusive games are doing anything so innovative they have to charge more, especially coming from the platform that for the last 8 years has had like a 20 to 30% margin for their profits, where you've got, Xbox, I think around 10 to 15%, and Sony below 10%, at least in recent years, because of a lot of other issues. But so you have this like multi-billion-dollar company that's pulling in an insane amount of money for a long time, just had a system with 130 plus million units sold, and has very little overhead, literally can sit on games for years, and in my opinion, sit on consoles for years. We'll get back to that. I think this is an interesting move, and I think Rockstar is looking at this and saying maybe we can charge $100 for Grand Theft Auto. And I think Sony and Microsoft are looking at their next gen consoles coming out in the next 2 to 4 years and saying, huh, well, if they can charge almost $500 for this thing, surely we can charge 1,000 for our next consoles and charge 100 for the games. And I don't like that precedent being set, especially not by Nintendo. We got a new Donkey Kong game, which has been a really long time since they've done a 3D game. So that was pretty cool. People seemed excited about that. Kirby Air Riders, sure, I guess. Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Wild are getting Nintendo Switch 2 editions. This is a big point of contention for me. It's so hilarious. And maybe this conversation will happen, but Xbox catches, and PlayStation to a point as well, catches so much crap for convoluted namings of things and things being too complicated and different tiers of Game Pass and all all this stuff. Well, right now, so the way it's going to work with games on the Switch 2 is you're going to have Switch 2 exclusive games. So that's fairly simple, right? You're going to have Switch 1 games who will work on Switch 2 at Switch 1 fidelity and performance and all of that. Then you're going to have Switch 2 editions of Switch 1 games, like what's being said here, which you'll have to pay for. Unless, with some of those, if you have Nintendo Online, you'll get that Switch 2 edition for free, but not all games, not all Switch 1 games. And not all Switch 1 games are going to get Switch 2 editions. And then a select number of Switch 1 games will get a more minor free upgrade for the Switch 2, but it won't be a Switch 2 edition. I assume that just means they're going to unlock FPS or something on some games. I think like Mario Odyssey and some other games fall into that category. So you're talking about like 5 different categories of games. And some of it you have to pay extra for. Some of it is dependent on a subscription. Like, it's just funny to me that, and maybe this conversation happens in the long run. Maybe I'm being a victim complex person right now because of my Xbox bias, right? But if Xbox did this, people would be eviscerating it from minute one for being overcomplicated and blah, 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 blah. Not to mention the issues I have with next gen versions of games costing anything. I just, especially when they aren't, like fully remaking a game or something for the next console where they're literally just adjusting some settings. But that's maybe a different conversation. So curious to how that plays out. We'll have to wait and see. Metroid Prime 4 Beyond is getting a Switch 2 edition. This is one that uses the mouse controls. This one was interesting to me. This is a game where like the art direction is obviously big. The gameplay is a big focus. But I've seen people like drooling over themselves about like, oh my God, this game looks so amazing. Like it looks like a GameCube game. Just, like that's like been like up-resed, right? And to the point where people are like, oh my God, it plays 1080p, 120 frames. It's like, yeah, I freaking hope so. It's a really old game. Like it's obviously based on like an engine and assets and stuff that are really old. This is probably just the outsider part of me who just maybe since I'm not in the ecosystem, I don't fully appreciate it. But to me, this was just like a weird one where people are so amazed by what it's going to be able to do, and I'm just kind of like, well, I certainly hope so. This is, a brand new system. I certainly hope it can do those things, and I don't know if it's all that impressive, but that's just me. Moving down, I am going to skip some of this stuff. The Pokemon Legends Z to A Switch 2 edition is hilarious because they said it's going to up the resolution and frame rate. We've seen this game on Switch 1 quite a bit. It looks rough, character models are fine for the style they're going for, but it looks generations old. And one of the wildest things about that game that I saw, I think Digital Foundry pointed out, is that the buildings in the city of that game are literally just flat polygons, are literally just cubes with textures pasted on them. And I've seen people be like, oh, it's gonna look so much better on the Switch too. Like it'll probably just run at a steady frame rate where it obviously won't on the Switch 1, but it's still just gonna have, like, you're gonna be playing a game in 2025 on a brand new $450 system that has flat textures on a box. And like that's supposed to be okay. I don't know. I'm probably just being a jerk. This was a fun one. The Switch 2 Welcome Tour is a showcase title that will show you all of the new features and all of the little things that you can do with the new system. Super, super cool. You have to pay for it. This is so clearly one of those things that it's literally a tech demo. You just include this with the game, or with the system. Like, how is it not preloaded for free? But no, you have to pay for it. And so it's just people aren't going to. Like, it's so weird move. Some of this the GameCube thing, this was one where this is definitely me being an outsider thing that just didn't make sense to me. GameCube games, backwards compatibility, I guess they make new versions of these games because their backwards compatibility system just sucks. They're bringing GameCube games finally to the new system. It's only going to work for Switch 2, even though this is a 4 or 5 generation old platform. And these games should easily work on the Wii, the Wii U, the Switch 1, and now the Switch 2. It's only going to be on Switch 2. Like, this is one of those things where, like, obviously this is really cool. There's a bunch of great games on GameCube. People are going to be super excited to get to play on a more modern system with, like, at least really good performance. We'll see if they get, like, new versions of it. And they also do have this new GameCube controller that will work with the Switch 2. But, like, how did this just happen? Like, how in the world were these games not, at least on the Wii U or the Switch 1? And how are they only releasing it for the Switch 2? There's no way these games wouldn't work at least on the Switch 1. And then probably the Wii U, which is a forgotten thing anyways. But even back to the Wii, these things should have worked. If I remember correctly, you could pop open the little side panel on the Wii and punch in GameCube games. So that was their own backwards compatibility back then, but still. It's crazy that this isn't going to work on the original Switch. And that obviously is them being like, hey, sorry, if you want to play these GameCube games on the new system, you got to get a Switch 2. Interesting. The third party was pretty big. This Dusk Bloods was a pretty big announcement. It's from Software game. It's being led by Miyazaki, who's kind of like their main guy there. This was so funny because when it got revealed, this is a Switch 2 exclusive. As far as we can tell, this will not be on PlayStation or Xbox or even PC. This is a Switch 2 exclusive. Has tons of, like, Bloodborne sequel imagery, even though it's not, I guess, even though it seems like it kind of is. And what was interesting is when this got revealed in the trailer, people were losing their minds, which is fair. It's a big deal. I personally can't stand From Software games. I think they're ugly. That's a personal subjective thing. Objectively, I'm bad at their games. Like that type of game, I get too frustrated, and that's a me problem. But I think their games are super ugly. I hate their designs, the way everything looks. That's just a personal preference, though. This game was interesting because I was like, wow, that's a pretty big pull for them to get a single player From Software game that people love these games from that studio. And people are going to buy this just to do that because they aren't going to want to miss out on one of these games. And then it came out later that it's an 8-player PvPvE, like, open world game. And I think that is going to kill interest in this in a lot of ways. It's still going to sell well. It's still going to sell some systems for sure. but I think them, because there's two things there's a thing in common between From Software and Nintendo is they don't do online great, and this is going to be an online dependent game, especially in this style of game. I'm just, especially the PvP aspect, like, man, like a shared world, I kind of get that, maybe, okay, and then you add a PvP element in. Now, I'm curious how that plays out. I suspect it won't be as big as it could have been. The very interestingly named Elden Ring edition for Switch 2 is called the Tarnished Edition, which is kind of funny because people are making the joke of like, yeah, it's tarnished because it's going to be a lower quality port, because Elden Ring doesn't run great on the PlayStation 5 or Xbox Series X. And so, knowing that those systems are objectively more powerful than this Switch, even if the Switch has some extra tech, which we'll talk about, um, it'll be interesting to see how this runs on that system. They did announce the Hyrule Warriors game. I believe it's being made by an outside third party, but it's kind of a prequel to Tears of the Kingdom, which could be kind of interesting. I think it follows more of Zelda's journey through that world and into that game. Hades 2 was an obvious choice to go on here. That made complete sense. And then they had a bunch of partner things on here. Cyberpunk was interesting, talking about DLSS. So the Switch 2 and Switch 1 use NVIDIA chips. The assumption was that the Switch 2 would use DLSS. As far as we can tell, and from what I saw on Digital Foundry, there was no evidence that DLSS was used at any time during this reveal. The only exception maybe was when they showed that Cyberpunk 2077 is going to work on this. Because that's a heavy game, and I find it hard to believe that even with this upgraded hardware that it would be able to run that game very well without a DLSS type tech. And DLSS uses Cyberpunk as like their baby. Like that's the main game that they've used over the years now to show off DLSS. And even in my own experience, it's insane. Like it works extremely well. It makes that game very playable at insane settings on a, like, even my PC is fairly moderate. It's like an okay rig, right? So, but of all this stuff, I mean, it's cool they're getting more third-party support, and they are going to have to do all these games streaming like they did with the Switch 1. But I'm curious to how many of these end up being 4K 60 FPS or 1080p 120 frames. I bet it's not going to be very many. And then they did show off the funny one was Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade is on the Switch 2 before it's even going to be on the Xbox. I still to this day think that Sony must have just paid a ton of money to keep this off of Xbox. Let's kind of give my final thoughts about this here. So like I said, this before this trailer, before this reveal, I mean, you can go back and look at my social media posts, even podcasts and stuff. I was going to get one of these. It was almost a guarantee unless they completely effed it up. And for me, they did. Like the price of this system, it's $50 more than a digital PS5 or Series X. It's $150 more than a Series S, which it's not even as powerful as. My thing is, I think what it comes down to for me is that if I break people into two kinds of customer base, right? So you have the Nintendo people who don't care about graphics, don't care about performance. They just care about gameplay and, art direction, right? Well, those people, as far as we know right now in this reveal, there was, I think, only a couple Switch 2 exclusive games that even got announced. So for the most part, these are just, remakes or upgrades or whatever. They're going to be on Switch 2 on release. So if you have a Switch 1 and you don't care about 4K or 120 frames, then why would you upgrade, right? You don't need to. And then if you are a person who cares about graphics and all that stuff, why would you pay more for this when you could get one of the other platforms? The obvious answer is Nintendo exclusives. Well, there's not going to be that many at the start, and there's other ways to play those if you really want to. And, because if you're a graphics person, and with a Switch, and the Switch 2 is something you're considering, you're going to be play it docked. So why not just get a digital Series X or a PS5? Especially if you get a Switch 2, it's going to be more expensive than those things, and you're going to be paying $20, $30 more for the games with what seems to be in an inferior ecosystem when it comes to the actual tech of it, the online things and all that. With Xbox, obviously you have Game Pass. That is very profitable. If you play a ton of games, you can really get a lot out of that. You can start it and stop it as you please. I don't know where the value is with this system. And it genuinely, for me, like turned into a thing where I haven't had Nintendo hardware in a long time. There's a ton of old games I want to catch up on, but nothing here like made it feel like, even if I pre-ordered just the system, or say I got the Mario Kart edition, it gives you Mario Kart like $30 cheaper than separate, $500. I'm gonna need at least one more set of controllers. It's $90, so there's almost $600. I assume I would get Nintendo Online to get some of these features that seem pretty essential. So then there's, so you're getting up to, PS5 Pro prices. And for someone who I'm like interested in having the PS5, but I've just never been able to justify it. Like, do I want to pay $600 or more to get an all new Nintendo setup? Not to mention the games I'm gonna have to pay for that appear. And even say I got a Switch 2 and I just wanted to play old games. They don't lower their prices on their old games. So even the game from many years ago at this point, and not to mention if I want the Switch 2 edition, I'm gonna have to pay more. I'm looking at, I would probably be in for $1,000 to get into their ecosystem. And I don't, that doesn't feel worth it. Especially this hardware doesn't. I think the kind of final thing I'll say, my final kind of hot take on this in a very long video, is I think this, the rumor is that this hardware has been ready for years, and that they were just waiting until the sales of the Switch dropped enough to justify putting out a new system. And this definitely feels like it. It's an old hardware from what we can tell. Digital Foundry is under the impression it's I think an 8 nanometer processor SoC, which is old and cheap and decently powerful, but really badly battery efficient, which they're saying that it could be only like 2 to 6 hours or something of battery life. Like, this probably should have been the Switch Pro like 2 or 3 years ago, and that would have made way more sense. And it would have made more sense in general. I think it seems very iterative. This doesn't seem like even the Xbox One, the Series systems, or even the PS4, the PS5, which weren't the biggest upgrades on earth, but were significant upgrades. This isn't that. It's definitely not like the 360 to Xbox One or PS3 to PS4, or going back even further. This seems so iterative. And then you get to the pricing and all that, and people are talking about tariffs already, of like, oh, it's only that expensive because of tariffs. It's an equivalent price in Europe, which presumably doesn't have the same tariffs as what's going on in the United States right now. So, like, I don't know. I'm surprised. I was ready to lay down cash, pre-order this baby, be playing it in June. And at the very least, I'm not pre-ordering it day one. And I don't even know if I'm going to wait years now, because probably in 2026, I bet we get an OLED screen version. And then the rumors will start about the Switch 2 Pro, which may never happen, or will happen. They'll call it the Switch 3, even though it probably should have just been a Switch 2 Pro, in 8 years. So I don't know. I was surprised. I've been surprised to see people going so hard defending this, and I understand fandom and all that. I'm probably going to do the same thing when the next Xbox hardware gets revealed, even though I hope it's more worthy of whatever they charge for it, and of it being a new generation of hardware than this is. This was really disappointing to me. And I think for people who are already in the ecosystem, that they're probably pumped, whether it's just because of being fanboys or because they're genuinely excited, and that's great. No hate on that. If you're excited, be excited. Don't let a fuddy-duddy like me ruin that. But I also hope that you can understand why people, especially people outside of the ecosystem, don't understand why this is exciting. It just seems like a huge money dump in a time where, people probably shouldn't just be blowing their money on things like this. So it's going to sell well. It's going to get reviewed well. People are going to love it. I suspect it won't be received as well as the Switch. I doubt Nintendo even expected that. But it's going to be very interesting to see over the next 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years how this does and how quickly they move on from it. Because this just, to me, doesn't feel like that true jump that I think we kind of hoped it would be. But we'll have to wait and see. If you like this video, please consider subscribing to the channel. I do all kinds of coverage of video games in general. I especially look at things like Mass Effect and The Division and Xbox, but I like talking about other things as well. Please hit the like button so more people see the video. Please consider becoming a YouTube member if you want videos like this early and some other cool perks. Check out the links in the description of the video for all of my other content and ways you can support what I do. That is all I have for this one, so until next time.